Hello, Shadow. Um, Hello, Shadow. Hi.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah.
We're going to start at exactly 3:45. 3:45.
Okay, sounds perfect then. Sounds perfect. Really appreciate that. Hello to everyone over there.
And it's like, yes, also check that if it's okay, so yes, I copied it. Right. Yes. When you give me the email, yes. Okay. Hello. Hello, Shagun. Hello, Shagun. Hello, Shagun. Hello, Shagun.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here. Can you hear me?
I think we can start by introducing the panelists, then we'll take it from there.
Okay, sounds perfect then. Hi everyone. My name is Shegun Ofungo. I'm a PhD candidate at Norman Patterson School of International Affairs here in Canada, and I think we have Oluwatobi Adewumi as one of our panelists. I think he's the chair also, and female members. I don't think they are here online, but hello.
Well, can you hold on? Let me confirm people that are present here.
Yeah.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, panel. I'm just going to start with the introduction and explications of people. The panel is titled The People Giant 25 Years On Democracy, Developmental, Federalism, and its context in the scholarship of Eghosa. Please, some ground rules. Please, all forms of silence. Please, let's avoid any form of distraction. If you're presenting and you have a slide, can you please pick it up or send it to Lagos Studies Association 3@gmail.com. I would like to confirm at this point that we have Oluwatobi. Okay, Oluwatobi is online. Emmanuel Remy, we have Emmanuel Remy here. Okay, we're waiting for Emmanuel Remy. Do we have Thomas Ajayi? Yes, Thomas Ajayi. Do we have Ajibola? Okay. Do we have Akushola? Yes, sir. Okay, sorry, sir. Schedule is online. So, and the respondent is Osaghae. Sorry, Osaghae. Yes, sorry, apologies. So, we'll just wait for the panel to come in. That's Oluwatobi. Oluwatobi, can you respond, please?
I think he's on transit, but I think I can just start the panel just before he comes.
Yes, I'm on transit and there's noise in the background. So I'm 5 minutes to the venue now. I'll join as soon as I can.
Okay. So maybe we should just wait for you for a bit, or to share take over.
Is there any way you can turn the camera?
No, you don't have to wait for me, please. Shegun is online. Yeah, let Shegun start up.
Is there any way you can turn the camera so I can see the room? It would be nice to see the room.
Okay, so Shegun, over to you.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So, is there any way you can just so that I can see the podium or see the?
Or can we have the panelists move to their seats so that
I can just see people? But it's not a big deal. I'm just looking at the wall right now.
Okay. Okay.
I just want to confirm if everybody can you see my screen?
Yes.
Also, is my screen visible? Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want me to start right now?
Yes, please.
Okay, ok, everybody. Bonjour, ça va très bien. Okay, everybody. My name is Shogun. My name is Shogun. I intentionally speak about because we are in Nigeria, and I try to promote my identity because I'm in Nigeria, and also the subject matter I'll be talking about today is related to the issue of owning our identity. So my name is Shogun Fongo. I'm a PhD candidate here at Norma Peterson School of International Affairs in Ottawa, here in Canada, and I'll be discussing the issue of design.
Hello, Shogun.
Yeah.
Mike echo. Can you do something about your mic? Your voice is echoing here.
What about now? Is it better now? Because my mic is really good. Is it better now, sir?
Yeah, it's better now. It's better now.
Is it better now?
Yes, it's okay now.
Okay. Oh, okay. Ekaro, sorry. I just want to greet everybody. Thank you so much for taking your time to be here. I really appreciate that. I want to thank all the organizers. Thank you so much for the hard work you guys are putting in. So as I earlier said, my name is Can you guys hear me?
Yes, you can.
Okay, I just want to, okay. So as I earlier said, my name is Olusegun Ofongo, and I'm a PhD candidate here at Norma Peterson School of International Affairs here in Carleton University, Canada. My research focuses on Canada national security strategy, African security, and development. And now today I'll be discussing on design to be crippled, the twin crisis of democracy and development in Africa. And that'll be subject matter that I'll be discussing. But before I start, I want to give a background on the rationale for me discussing the issue of democracy and development, because these are the two pillars that are actually confronting the African states, confronting the developmental crisis that we have in Africa and also in Nigeria. But the reality on ground is just that what we call democracy is actually not democratic enough. What we call development is not actually development enough. And I'll be using the research from Osaghae and also many postmodernist schools of thought. They are research in my analysis. So to move to the next slide, the legacy of colonialism, because we can't talk about democracy in Africa without talking about the legacy of colonialism, on the impact of colonialism on African economies, African institutions, and our culture. Because in the works of PPAK, colonialism and two publics, he said the colonial state created that two publics between we versus they. It created that identity crisis that we have today between the civic public and the civil public. So the state is kind of alien to the African people. That's because the state is alien to the African people in the works of AK. Osaghae also talked about it in his work in Crippled. So when the state is alien to them, democracy is elusive to the people of Africa. So when democracy is elusive to people of Africa, we actually don't understand or actually how to conceptualize democracy to suit us in Africa. We try to westernalize democracy, but the reality is just that the impact of the colonialism on African economies cannot be underestimated, and neither can it be blown out of proportion. But because we've seen the impact on the issue of our foreign exchange, it arrested our development, it arrested our institutions, an issue of structural functionalism, issue of the post-colonial state, because the post-colonial state is still alive and well. But I'm from more of a postmodernist perspective. I'm more of an Afro-optimist. And I believe that for us to actually talk about democracy in Africa, we have to actually trace the root of democracy. Most African states actually gained their independence in 1960, between 55-60. We discovered that most African countries gained their independence. But the reality on ground is just that since independence, the democracy that we have is actually very, very tyrannical. We see what is happening in Lake Chad. We see what is happening in Nigeria also, the recent election. I will get to that, but we've seen that the democracy actually be arrested. But the reality is that who is to be blamed? Are we to blame the colonialism? Are we to blame the leadership question? So I'll be talking about that in this paper. And to move to the post-colonial leadership, the post-colonial leadership failure in Africa is actually the reason why Africa is where we are today. And we are yet to answer the leadership question, because we are yet to answer the leadership question with a followership answer, because the post-colonial leadership in Africa is very, very parasitic. You know, everybody look, if you are from Nigeria, you look to London. If you are from the Anglophone, you look to London. If you are from the Lusophone, you look to Portugal. If you are from the Francophone, you look to Paris. But the reality, yeah.
Can you give you a minute, please? Just hold on, please. Thank you. Sorry, we need to be absolutely quiet so that everybody can enjoy the presentation. Can we reduce the side monitoring and the movement, please? Please. So you can continue, Shegun.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. So if you check, so the post-colonial leadership in Africa, it's actually been arrested. When I mean arrested, it has been stagnant, and I believe that it has been designed like that. It was not designed for democracy. The post-colonial states in Africa were not designed for development, and that's why you see most African leaders, they look outside of Africa for development. They look outside of African stage for an issue of terrorism is there, issue of state fragility is there, and the fragility of African state is actually there. Comment have talked about it in his classical work. Sami Ami, Claude Ake, all those lead scholars, when it comes to African security, African development, they've actually talked about it. But what do I really mean by post-colonial leadership failure? What do I mean by post-colonial leadership failure? Post-colonial leadership failure can actually be traced to the issue of state identity crisis. The state identity crisis, because the identity crisis that actually metamorphosed from the colonial state, pre-colonial state, metamorphosed into the post-colonial state, and you can see it in the African leadership. So if you look at, for instance, if you look at what the crisis that is going on in Sudan now, the same thing that has been happening before the independence. You can see the issue between the Ye and the Dinka. The same thing they have also in West. In West Africa, in Cameroon, the Kodea has been there for more than 40 years. These are post-colonial leadership. They inherited that. But the reality is that what has the West done? It has always been designed like that. That is what Sami Ami called the comprador bourgeoisie. So they are there to hold power for the so-called metropolitan bourgeoisie. Some might call it they are meant to hold power for the Western scholars. But the reality on ground is just that how long can African democracy be crippled? How long can African democracy survive? How do we even conceptualize the concept of democracy when it comes to Africa? Do we conceptualize the issue of election? And when we talk about election, is the democratic question yet to be answered? So the democratic question in Africa is the crisis of statehood and nationhood. We see what happened in the Biafra, what happened in Syria alone. We see what happened in South Africa, the post-apartheid in South Africa. You can trace that along the Sahara like that. You can see that the crisis of this crisis of statehood and nationhood is there. How do we even manage our ethnic religious identity crisis? So if you are from the Southwest, you're trying to vote along ethnic and identity and also religious line. So and our leaders actually mismanage our diversity. Our diversity is supposed to be our strength, but the leaders actually, they inherit a weak state. The weakness of the state is actually telling, you can see when it comes to even interaction, in day-to-day interaction. And it boils down to the question of, is democracy actually practiced in Africa? These are uncomfortable questions that we need to actually interrogate as scholars. Is democracy actually practiced in Africa, or we are just practicing a de facto form of authoritarianism? You see what is happening in the Chad, in Niger. The president has been kicked out. In Chad, the same thing. In Nigeria, they just had their election in Nigeria, and electoralism in Africa is actually based on patron-client privilege. The propaganda politics, that the entrenched political elite. The democratic question is there to be answered. The issue of, is the election actually free? The data I have here is from IPRIT. It recorded over 4,890 political violence attacked in Nigeria alone. And if you look at the map, it goes to the question of, can you talk about electoral free and fair election in Africa? Look at the data here. Data actually shows that there were 13,000 fatality. This is within a period of 1 year. A period of 1 year. And the question that comes to mind is, how do we correct this? How do we fix this as political scientists, as intellectuals, as Africanists and African scholars? How do we fix this? It boils down to we need to get back to this drawing now, because it has been designed to be crippled. When they gave us independence, I keep saying they gave us independence, we did not get independence. When they gave us independence, it was designed to be crippled. It was designed to be underdeveloped. It was designed for them not to be free and fair election. It was designed for people to vote along ethnic and religious and political lines. And that discussion, you can see it in the issue of development. You can see it in the development crisis in Africa, where it begins. It begins from the pre-colonial state, where it was meant for exploitation. Where it begins, how it started from the exploitation. And where we are, they are still exploiting us. The dollar to naira rate, the exchange rate is different in different parts of the country. I mean, in different parts of the continent. And the question now is, how do we even quantify the concept of development? Everybody go to China, to make their peace offering there in China. And then when I mean peace offering, they go there to make deals in China. All the world leaders, some of them are in Paris now. It's an uneven balanced development. How can somebody like Tanzania be at the trade table with China? So I'm of the view that Africa should come as a united bloc like AU when it comes to doing this trade negotiation, and the developmental crisis in Africa is yet to be answered. And that'll be my short presentation for today. And I look forward to the contribution from the audience and also question from the audience. Thank you. Hello?
Okay, we can hear you. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. Can you stop sharing your slide, please? Over to you. Oluwaseun. Can you hear me, Oluwaseun? Yes. That's okay. So I hear that. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be part of this panel. I would have joined right from the beginning. I think I had network issues. So I'm a part of this, and I've tried to also get across to Professor Eghosa Osaghae to see if we can get him respond to some of the presentation that we have. Being that as it may, I thank Oluwatobi Adewumi for holding forth, and I will then welcome all of you and express solidarity with these presentations. I believe that the processes have already been spelled out. I'll just call on Adewumi to call on the next presenter to this presentation. Thank you very much. Adewumi, can you continue?
Okay,
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Adewumi is not here.
Oh, it's not.
Yes.
Okay. I think that's the.
Okay, so I'll just call on the next presenter. Can we have Thomas Ajayi, please? Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yes, what's it? Okay, my name is Thomas Osaghae. I'm getting the service on the Crippled giant and prognosis for emancipation. I do this for Professor Osaghae, who obtained this 25 years ago. Professor Osaghae has been a great figure who has impacted lives, and he has been my personal boss. He's the teaching of NII where I can work to. And I want to thank Professor Eghosa, who finished speaking just now, who was my lecturer at the university. Content I have introduction, the aims of study, aim of study, statements of the problems, methodology, and the likes. Theoretical framework, dependency theory, and restriction theory, and two theories are used there. The giant Nigeria. Okay, so the forces and the factors between Nigeria, internal and external forces, proving for emancipation of other issues that raise a conclusion. Okay, Nigeria's independence by introduction in 1960 entered strict optimism. Given the nature of Nigeria's endowments, natural resources, and human capital, it became a critical concern how it has and had failed to utilize her potentials in achieving her national interests, particularly its socio-economic well-being, socio-political and economic well-being of citizens of the rest of Africa. The high expectations have met with fundamental setbacks. Professor Osaghae, in his epochal book, The Crippled Giant, gave a vivid account of the historical, socio-economic, and political trajectory of Nigeria at the pre-colonial, colonial, and the post-colonial eras, laying the foundation to the understanding to understanding present realities. The book, published in 1998, retains its value in Nigerian politics today, as it expounds the geographical location, historical formation, religious and ethnic composition of the Nigerian state. So this presentation aims to restate the fundamental challenges that cripple Nigeria's greatness within the context of the book, and it emphasizes other significant factors militating against the development of the state. Identity efforts, it identifies efforts made towards repositioning the state the challenges since return to democratic road, propose solutions to realizing the goals. Several more challenges building on the previous have further detracted from harnessing the strength of the state since 1998. Challenges of nation building in democratic system differ significantly from that of the military system. That's the statement of the problem now. The need to undo the quasi-federal structure to harness the greatness of the state and free it from encumbrances. The study now, research methodology, adopts qualitative research methodology, making use of secondary sources, primarily the book, The Crippled Giant, authored by Osaghae. It uses the historical process, analyzing the various accounts of national conferences, documents, and accounts of epochal developments in Nigeria. So why is Nigeria still in limbo? Why do we still have the challenges we have today? Given the vast array of natural resources we have, the human capital we have, why and how has the giant remained crippled over 6 decades after independence and 25 years of the authorship of this book? What steps are being taken to reverse all the ills done to the state of Nigeria in present context? What challenges have further challenged the state since the return to democratic rule in 1999? And can Nigeria be emancipated, freed to realize its dreams
of achieving greatness? These are the research questions that always bother virtually everybody in Nigeria today, and even those who are abroad. Now, theoretical framework, we looked at dependency theory and modernization theory. So, dependency, like Shegun Okongo mentioned earlier, who realized that Nigeria continues with the trend of colonialism. The moment after colonialism in 1960, the trajectory has been laid down such that Nigeria continues in that system. There is no way of there is no a change from the system. It is still the way it has always been that we have today because of what's called neocolonialism. Dependency theory is the idea that resources flow from the periphery, which is poor, undeveloped countries, to poor or wealthy states, enriching the latter at the expense of the former. A central contention of the dependency theory is that poor states are impoverished and rich ones are enriched by way of poor states being integrated into the world system. The colonial economic structure lay in the fact that its primary motive was to exploit the resources of the state and link it to metropolitan international capitalist system, which is what US, UK, and the like stand for today, and we have Nigeria at the periphery. The colonial state was an extractionist state that facilitated the smooth exploitation of resources and expropriation of surplus from Nigeria to the home states, thereby preventing the states from maximizing her potentials. To a large extent today now, Nigeria has not been able to even move near what it's supposed to achieve. Why? Because we have this relationship in which Nigeria depends largely on this the metropolitan or international capitalist system. Now we have modernization theory. So these are the two theories I'm using now. I use dependency theory and modernization theory. Modernization theory suggests that traditional societies will develop as they adopt more modern practices. Proponents of the which are Walt Rostow, Karl Dodge, who claim that modern states are wealthier and more powerful, and that their citizens are freer to enjoy higher standard of living. So is Nigeria one of 7 minutes? Yeah. The giant Nigeria. Nigeria is used to, the giant Nigeria is used to refer to the vast potential for development and stability other than the actual development capacity we have. Nigeria has the potentials, but in reality, do we have it? No. The country's large population is wealth and of resources, high potential manpower and infrastructure, and geographical location distinguishes it from the most other developed countries in Africa and the third world. Now, let me go straight to the point now. What are the factors crippling Nigeria today? They are both internal and what? External. If we look at the historical aspects of Nigeria, I don't, internal factors or forces, these are political. Prolonged military intervention, prebendalism, patronage system, accidental leadership. Over the years, Nigeria since 1966 has been controlled by military, was under the rule of the military, and then that continued until 1999 when eventually we got our independence, returned to democracy. But throughout this period, it was largely political, instability. There was no system. There was no system in place to ensure that we have a robust policy that can navigate from one year to the other, from one period to the other. It was just lumped up all through. And as a result of that, there was no way we could achieve anything. Prebendalism. What we refer to as prebendalism. Anyone who attains office at that particular point in time seeks how to arrogate the wealth of the nation to themselves, to their cronies and their relatives. And that's a long way crippled Nigeria's greatness. Patronage system, virtually everybody sees it as a business. You rob my back, I rob your back. I pay you back because I'm in office. I reward you back because I'm in office. And that happens to virtually everybody. And as a result of that, Nigeria couldn't plan on what it has. Now we have accidental leadership as well. So I bet to say that the first time we have anybody who has prepared to become a president in Nigeria is the last dispensation. And we hope to see that there will be some level of changes in the system. Virtually every other one we have had, they are accidental leaders. Nobody really planned to be there as president or to rule Nigeria as head of state. All of them just there by chance. And as a result of that, there was no long-term planning that could facilitate growth and development in Nigeria. Cultural, this is the structure in public morality accentuated by primordial differences. Virtually every group has their own interests that they are, they are trying to achieve. Religious conflicts fueled by intolerance, fear of domination, extremism, and disequilibrium imbalance of power concepts, such as in education. We can see the gap between the North and the South. There is completely no way of linking both of them together, because academic-wise, education-wise, the South is far more developed or advanced than the North. North and South divide, resource allocation, access to power, federal employment opportunities, and the like. Now we come to external forces. The external forces are the following: the neocolonialism, of course, the political interference by Britain, by US, and the likes in Nigerian political system, activities of multinational entities, rentiarism. What is rentiarism? Nigeria has majorly, we depend on oil, and the oil we have is not even refined by Nigeria. It is a rentier system in which the capitalists, the multinational companies like Shell, Chevron, and the like, they only rent to us, while our crude oil is exported down there, and we import back petroleum, petrol, and the likes of that. International financial institutions have also have not been helping matters. Why? Because the lending rate they give each time Nigeria goes there to, collect loans is always on the high side. At the same time, too, we have forceful policy implementation that is foisted on Nigeria. Now, during the SAP era, we realized that it was obvious that it was pushed to us that we must just embrace these policies. So to a large extent, Buhari refused to adopt this policy, and as a result of that, the economy was in limbo. Babangida came to power as well too, but he had no choice than to obey or adopt the policy that has been foisted on us. And as a result of that, we saw throughout the years of Babangida's era, it was a complete mess. Incoherent foreign policies and the like. Problems for emancipation. We have five major questions that Osaghae outlined in his book. He asked in his book. Only one of the five has been answered. The rest are national question, leadership question, governance question, and political, which are still very prevalent today. Regional, and to answer the question of how effectively to restructure the federation to accommodate the various groups and guarantee access to power and equitable distribution of resources, then there is need for regional and fiscal restructuring. Balance of power among components of the federation for equitable distribution of countries' resources. The leadership question as well, people of proven records in time and space character. Of course, it will be difficult to measure, but definitely this is one of the best ways I believe we can achieve the greatest Nigeria needs. Not just that alone, the governance question as well too, there is need for Nigeria to transform from being a soft state to an effective state, and this could be achieved through aggressive education in the north, and at the same time too, we start the process of ensuring that Nigeria becomes a productive state, not just an important state. And lastly, the search for a public realm morality to counter the embedded morality which resulted in corruption, prebendalism, and crisis in legitimacy. These basic needs of man, according to Maslow, needs to be addressed. Of course, when you are hungry, you can do anything, and that is why we see these corruptions. Virtually in all parts, among all Nigerians. The reason is everybody is just questing for survival until we begin to meet the needs of everybody, the basic needs at least, so that they can be assurance of their present and be secure of their tomorrow. It will be difficult for us to address these issues. Lastly, there are further issues to be addressed, which are condoning free and fair election, judicial independence, building strong institutions, containing insurgency, and the likes. What we are saying in essence is that for Nigeria to achieve its greatness, there is need for all-round overhauling. Both leadership questions have to be answered, governance and rights of them we need to. In conclusion, the crippled giant has the hope of emancipation and being free from the shackles that hold it bound. This can only be attained with conscious efforts aimed at its liberation, both internally and externally. Only when it sets to reduce its dependence on foreign powers, jettisoning the rentier system, and as well modernize along the path of development. There is need for us to begin to produce have production in our own country, produce based on the raw materials we have, and virtually ensure that Nigeria begins to export the excess of what we have rather than just importing every now and then. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think if you have another spoke on the picture, explain the sources, the time, the focuses, but investigation. Sorry, I joined the panel link, but I was following online and I noticed that Sue said in so far. Please going forward, panelists can take that we have 12 minutes. So we can give enough room for people to participate and ask questions. Without much ado, I'll be inviting Professor Eghosa to take us on the topic, the Crippled giant, what role for Nigerian state and its allies. Can you put that together for something?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Please think and then something.
Okay.
Right. Because of the online participants,
Yes, the topic is the crippled giant. What role for the Nigerian state and its allies? Sorry, please. Well, that is the abstract. We are talking about a country, Nigeria, that has been described as a giant, and definitely that cannot be far from being correct. That Nigeria is a giant, but the real issue is that he is a giant by name. Even though in the past it has actually demonstrated this role, but over time we've discovered that it cannot stand up to this name. And if we look at countries at the same level of development with Nigeria, the 1960s, many of them have overtaken Nigeria. So, and that raises the issue, and that's why we are trying to what could be responsible. So I have zero in on the state and its early. I have I've started from the period of amalgamation when Lugard actually brought the colony of Lagos and the Southern Protectorate and the North together. And but right then, even at the amalgamation, what will lead to it being crippled is also battered along with it. But by bringing together nationalities, bringing together different nationalities without their consent, now created a big problem. So we have examined, and Professor Osaghae had in his book in 1998 has actually described Nigeria as a crippled giant. And this, we have said, is actually based on what he has identified. He has provided a good historical development and even political analysis. So to the extent that we can say this looks rather like a paradox for a country that is giant as a result of the resources it has, human and material resources, but from the way it runs itself, it can no longer show for this. So I have tried to provide a review of this book by Eghosa Osaghae, and we have identified 3 major issues he raised in terms of the empirical elements. The first is the issue of since independence there is political instability. That has been a trend, even when there is what looks like a political stability, there is a policy instability. Then the inability of elites to actually bring about policies that will engender cohesion among the various ethnic nationalities. So there has been a major, and then the third one is the issue of economic crisis, which has been major thing that continues to stare the country in the face. These are the major which I want to try to elaborate on. So then I move further to examine Nigeria. Is it really a giant? Yes, I said yes. Nigeria could be a giant. And I've identified some potentials in Nigeria. For instance, you look at the resources, the human resources. Nigeria has so many human resources to the extent that Nigeria is even aiding some African countries with the technical aid corps. Nigerians in diaspora, they are making their marks. So and in all fields, then we talk about natural resources. There's hardly, apart from the crude oil, which Nigeria has been depending on, there are so many other resources which remain untapped. And if they are tapped, Nigeria will be swimming in a well. So, Nigeria has also contributed positively in the past, particularly in the colonization of Southern African countries. Nigeria has played leading role in the independence of Namibia, independence of Botswana, and all those Southern African countries. And even with the resistance of the world power, Nigeria was able to actually force its way and mobilize other African countries. So this is that's an indication that Nigeria, there's giant in Nigeria. And we look at the other areas, even in the sports, some of the time Nigeria has made its man, particularly the women, and even the Nollywood actors, that they have popularized Nigeria abroad. So that shows then we now, why then, even with all this, why is Nigeria a crippled giant? So I've identified 14 points there that I can actually show that Nigeria is that have actually crippled Nigeria. And these include the issue of inability to actually bring a united nation. Even during the colonization era, what we had is that although the nationalists were actually fighting for independence, but there wasn't any sense of a nation. And even by the time they took over, it has been difficult for them to do this. What really happened was they only inherited the colonial enterprise and took the place of the colonial. Then we also talk of the coups, the instability, the coups, the military coups, and even the civilian regime in the First Republic was overthrown, the Balewa regime, the Shagari regime, the Shonaka regime, or administration, all those were overthrown. Even among the military, the Gowon regime, the Rossi regime was overthrown, the Gowon regime was overthrown, the Buhari regime was overthrown, and that continued until we came to this Fourth Republic. Then the military also did a lot of damages, particularly by over-centralizing the Nigerian state, taking the country from the path of the federalism to a pseudo-federalism, or what is rather a unitary state. So then we have the issue of mismanagement of all the resources. Nigeria has been, with all the resources Nigeria has, the resources are mismanaged. Then we have the issue of grandiose projects coupled with policy implementation, poor policy implementation, policy, how many minutes? Of policy, stability, and all the rest. So, and we have the issue, the location of the country within the international capitalist system, in which case Nigeria remains, the issue of dependency continues to affect the country. Nigeria cannot produce even the energy we use at home, even though with the crude oil Nigeria cannot, with 4 refineries, Nigeria cannot produce its own petroleum. It has to import it. Then we have the issue of electoral manipulation by the great power, based on the clientelism and the prebendalism. Then we have democracy has turned to a hope betrayed. Then we have the majority of those who manage Nigerian state suffer from what I call a poverty. I have idea. Including the bureaucrats who are very knowledgeable, there is a problem of a lack of philosophy of administration and governance. So given that, so now what then is what role has the state and the elite played? The state is a colonial creation meant to exploit, and this has not been revised, even revised by the nationalists. Then that continues. Then we have it now creates an avenue for exploitation by the vampires who have taken over the country. Please, I'm very sorry. Then one of the states, ordinarily the states are the ones who should lead, forge the way for development. But Nigerian elites haven't failed in this respect. And rather, they are just mere vampires because of the nature, the post-colonial nature of the Nigerian state. Nigeria, as a nation, the state concludes virtually everything, and to the advantages of the elite. So then, how can we now restore these? How can we now restore these crippled giants? How do we restore these? I have proposed 3 options. One, it is difficult to actually. The first option is that the elites themselves, who are ruling Nigeria today, they benefit from the situation, so they don't want any change. But except they now willingly, which will be very difficult. It's like asking them to destroy their own empire. They might not willing, but that is an option. It can get to a time where they'll say, "Oh, we are tired of this. Let's move forward." Just like people in the Probation state of nature, oh, let's create a state. Then the second is that within the elite also, there could be a group, a revolution within the elite, and that group can take over and now think of a better nation. Then the third one is even the uprising, like the Arab Spring. The answer that was tried about 2 years ago failed, even though with all effort. But if it must, survive, it must change the country. They must be resilient, like what we had during the Arab Spring. So that's I've concluded that actually the situation here, the situation in the country is actually pathetic, and there appears to be a very serious thing. Why we often blame the colonialists, the character of the Nigerian state and its elite. How do we restore these people there? There's a need for a surgical operation on the character of the state. It's the character of the state that allows its exploitation by the elite. So there is a need for that. And there is the need for behavioral and attitudinal change among the elite. Without sounding pessimistic, this will be another start. It will be like a camel passing through the needle side.
Thank you very much. Can we move on to the secretary for before you invite the last speaker, I need to make the point that this panel was organized not only because Professor Eghosa targeted for this 25 this year, but also because we are at that stage in our national life that we also reflect on whether federalism is working for us, and if not, what alternatives. So I would like that we pay attention to what the possible alternatives are. And also there is a sense in which the book conjures the gloomy nature of the Nigerian state But Osaghae wrote this book in 1998. A lot of things have changed since then. So I'd like us to also pay attention to the narratives of change in the work of our presenter. So without wasting any further time, I would like to call another person than Ajibola Dike, who will be speaking to the topic aggregation of different political parties, ideologies, and the management of diversity in the Crippled giant. Thank you.
Good afternoon. So I'll be presenting on this very topic about how political parties are actually vehicles for aggregation of difference in the works of Crippled giants. So people have said, political scientists, scholars, even politicians have said that Nigerian political parties are often without ideologies. That's a common refrain that people make.
All right, take it.
All right. All right. So they've said that Nigerian political parties are often without ideologies, and politicians have said it. Banky W here has tried to switch parties several times because he said that Nigerian political parties are, of course, without ideologies. But my argument today is that that's actually not true. Nigerian political parties are actually very much with ideologies. If we look at the Crippled giants, and if we look at the evolution of our political history, you will conclude that Nigerian political parties are indeed very much ideological. But the faulty premises that we have is about the teleological functions of what ideologies are. We think that ideologies are supposed to be for an end. So that's what I'll be speaking on today. So why do people say that Nigerian political parties are often without ideologies? If you take a cursory look of most of the manifestos that we've had in the past, you see that all of them deliberately try to say that it's very hard for you to read the manifestos and say that this is the ideology that this particular political party has. In fact, if you change their names, you probably not be able to tell the difference, because a lot of times they try deliberately to not say this is the kind of way they would go. And my conclusion there is that it's actually a very strategic ways that political parties have tried to get people's attention. And I will say this, I come to this conclusion because of the kind of things that they want to do with such strategies. Secondly, parties are of course, known by their ideologies and the faulty notions of what ideologies are about. So with the Crippled giant, we'll see that, for example, in 1946, Obafemi Awolowo says that Nigeria was a mere geographic expression. In the past, Italy has been said to be also a mere geographic expression. The same thing Ahmadu Bello said, that Nigeria is the mistake of 1914. Basically, the first point of ideological disagreements that the founding fathers had was the kind of nation that Nigeria was supposed to be. Was it supposed to be conservative, like the northern aristocracy wanted it, or was it supposed to be liberal, like the southern politicians wanted it? And these they tried to even form in their political manifestos. For example, we'll see that the Arewa People's Congress and a lot of those parties, for example, were actually very ethnic driven, and for a very good reason, because their evolution came from the kind of society that they were derived of. So, for example, the northern oligarchy wanted a place where the northern oligarchy would be the ruling elites. The southern politicians wanted people who would be educated and, for example, go to school. That was why they wanted free education and all of that. The northern oligarchy weren't so much for that. So those are kinds of ideologies that were already inherent in their documents. And sometimes they even did say it. But this did not, however, achieve the gains that they wanted. So, for example, when the NPN, for example, the action group had ideologies, for example, like they said, democratic socialism was what the ideology of the action group was about. This did not allow them, this did not speak directly to the people. This did not allow them to get power. So the first rule of politics, of course, is power, instead of what you will do with it. You first have to get power first before you now say, what would I do with it? And the faulty assumptions that Nigerian political parties are without ideology is that we think that ideologies must come with the political parties. This is not necessarily so. In fact, a lot of times you have ideologies without parties, and you can have parties without ideologies. These can come from your political involvement and how a society is defined. For example, what is the question that you want to use your political party to do? And that's the first questions that these answers. So, colonialism, of course. All right, so now the faulty conception of the ideologies that we have is also always from that ideal kind of ideology that a lot of us are used to. For example, we want parties that are conservative or environmental or whatever the ideology is. We seem to have a systematic idea of what ideology is about, and they have to be wholesome. And a lot of times that's always because from our trainings, we are often taught that ideologies should be holistic and should have systems and discipline, even to discipline people to get in line. But this is not always so. Another kind of ideology that are inherent in a lot of political parties in Nigeria is actually the identity structure. So, for example, as we will see, there was a lot of hoo-ha about the Muslim ticket. And people would ask, why was that such a very topical debate? Well, the reason is that a lot of times people have tried different kinds of alliances that did not work. So there were ethnic alliances of Muslim, of Northern Muslim, Southern Christian, and all of those arrangements in several republics. And that failed to deliver what the political party really wanted, which is power. Power first before ideology. And so, of course, the kind of ideologies that we seem to want Nigerian political parties to have are the intellectualized one, where everything is. So, for example, in the last election, everyone was asking about where are the manifestos? Where are the manifestos? Well, even if you had all the manifestos, would you read them? Even if you read them, would the political parties follow them? They won't. They do it just to, as a matter of speaking, tick the box. So that the ideology will be comprehensive, that they will be systematic, and that they will be popular, that everyone will know the kind of ideologies that this party has or that party has. So, and would anyone think about how a businessman is the presidential candidate of a Labour Party? That's sort of a paradox, but that's the Nigerian story. And that's also why Nigeria is a crippled giant that it is. So the identity structure ideology is the inconsistent, limited, fragmentary, and very unpopular. Sometimes this is not, it is actually because it's unpopular that I'm having this conversation with you. It's inconsistent because a lot of times politicians have to change if they see that something is not working. If they have tried ethnic alliances in the past and they see that that's not working, they will do religious alliances. And if they have tried religious alliances and they will see that that's not working, maybe they will try gender alliances. Whatever works for a political party, the political party will do. As everyone would know, the ruling party, the APC, came into power because the CPC, which was a very conservative Muslim party in the north, came to bed with the AC. And anyone who takes a keen interest in Nigerian political parties would see that that was actually a very, very unreasonable alliance, but it did get them into power. And that's why even the Muslim ticket thing did deliver the goods. And eventually that's what political parties are about. Of course, in the First Republic, we saw that there were ethnic alliances, and then they had what we call intellectualized ideal type ideologies. There was democratic socialism. Then in the Second Republic, they said now it was unity in diversity. So the kinds of federalism that was supposed to be practiced was now tried to be stylized in the Second Republic. That also did not deliver the good for the AG, the Action Group, and then the UPN, the Unity Party of Nigeria, which was of course led by Obafemi Awolowo. And I say this because every time people say that Nigeria is a mere geographic expression, the idea is that with that mere geographic expression, there is a solution to it. And of course, the solution that it provides is unity in diversity, which is a loose kind of federalism that empowers the regions more than the center. But that was the idea he wanted to use, what's the name, the party that when it gets into power to do. But he could not get there.
Yes.
So he could not get there. Of course, that was also the story with the NCNC, who was very Afropolitan and all of that. And the Second Republic, of course, the National Party, they had. So eventually what happened was that there were decline of ideal type ideologies over the years. And yeah, the decline of ideal type of ideologies over the years, because political parties are first and foremost to get into power. Now, in these past elections, we see that there has been a kind of ideological convergence, so much so that we do not know what the APC, for example, is doing market reforms. The Labour Party is led by a capitalist. The PDP has also, so basically there is a convergence now. So eventually what would happen is that the parties would now, after this convergence, parties will now try to distinguish themselves. But first they have to converge before they diverge. That's my argument. And yeah, and all this can be found, of course, in the works of Professor Osaghae, who argues that federalism by itself is not an end, it's a tool. And so ideologies. Ideologies are by themselves also not an end, they are tools. And that's what political parties have used them for. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've had 4 speakers speak to us on several topics, and I think these are social issues. Like I said earlier, not only because Professor Osaghae's work is important here, but also perhaps more importantly, so as we are getting to that point in our national life where we need to have a conversation about what works for us. And this is meant to stimulate some of these conversations. Like I said, I was listening online when Shegun was on. By the way, Shegun, can you hear us? Shegun, can you please hear us? Because you will be taking questions soon. Okay. So I was saying that Shegun was talking about the design that came to play, and that Nigeria was by virtue designed to fail, and was saying a lot of things about the colonial masters still being blamed for where we are today. he said a lot about the post-colonial state, and I think we need to engage the whole concept of what post-colony is, because according to Professor Olufemi Taiwo, there is no such thing as a post-colony. But anyway, that's up to us to engage. Also, I joined in when Thomas Udai was talking about the fact that Nigeria is mostly an extractive state. We don't produce a lot, and that feeds into the kinds of rental systems that we find, and this leads to divisions in hierarchy. Also, Professor Agagu talked about the role of the elites, and I would like to say here that he said something that I personally don't agree with, that the NSAS movement failed, perhaps because whatever reason, it didn't work. No, the NSAS movement was fueled by the same elites that we are now talking about. So the moot point, I guess, is trying to say is that the elites are partly responsible for our woes, the woes of our federalism, the reason why it doesn't work. We need to look to the elites. But interestingly, currently there's a panel going on Daniel Abigbo's book, who also looked at the role of the citizens. So while we are blaming the elites for our woes, are we also looking at what the citizens are also doing in terms of the success or failure of our federal system? Then lastly, Jibola talked about ideologies, and he said the reason many of us misunderstand party ideologies is perhaps because we don't know that it is supposed to be a means to an end for the political parties. And so therefore, the politics of ideology is simply the politics of convenience. And maybe that might hold if we have comments around that. Before we take comments and other questions, I would like Professor Remi Aide, who is joining us online, to give some of his comments on the papers. Prof.
Yeah, thank you very much, Adewumi, for that brief summary. I want to congratulate all those who have made presentations during this panel, from Segun Ofongo to Thomas Ajayi, Akinshola Agagu, and then of course, Ajibola Adigun. I think they have tried to connect with the themes of crippled giants. And they have also tried to look at it in terms of different themes and issues that were raised in the crippled giant. But I think there's need for them to properly locate the issues within the historical context in terms of continuity and discontinuity. And if you have read the crippled giant, one thing that will strike you is the very fact that it is an attempt to propose ways, especially theoretical approaches to the study of the government and politics of Nigeria. And to that extent, you can only appreciate the crippled giant if you are also conscious of the need not only to lament about the challenges of Nigeria, but also to be able to provide alternative solution to what we envisage. And one important point that I think comes out of the entire presentation is the need to be very critical about theoretical ideas that goes around about the nature of politics in Nigeria. I think it's important for us to be conscious of the need to move away from lamentation into addressing the realities of Nigerian government and politics as not something unique to Nigeria, but as part of the process of state building, or if you like, nation building. And it must also be recognized, like Osaghae, you will find from Osaghae's many works, that state building or nation building is never finished anywhere. In fact, Bob Jessup insists that state building never ends. It is an eternal process. And therefore, it is important as we look at these issues to be critical of received opinion and try to bring out new ideas, new theoretical expositions about how some of these issues can be better grasped. And I think that's very important, because it's one of the challenges of the study of politics in Africa is the tyranny of received theoretical approaches, and the fact that we need to be more creative in trying to address that. So I thank everyone for the presentation they have made so far, but I think that critical thinking needs to be addressed so that we can better decipher the limits and scope of what we are presenting. I mean, take for instance the question of the crisis of democracy and development in Nigeria. You ask yourself, if there's a crisis of development, what is the nature of that development? And if there's a crisis of democracy, what is the nature of the crisis of democracy? And what are the interfaces, between these two broad concepts? I think we need to unpack many of these concepts in our attempt to be able to address government and politics of Nigeria, so that we do not mistake the trees for the forest. And then lastly, I would like to say that one of the fundamental elements of the Crippled giant is the historical approach. And the problem with history is that our perceptions, our biases, our location, whether in terms of geography, in terms of ethnic origin, or even in terms of class relations, tend to influence the way we look at things. And that's why the idea of being critical is very important, so that many of the claims that were made from some of these presentations are historically questionable. And I think it's important for us to have a very balanced perspective to the Nigerian situation. And I think that's where the Crippled giant is particularly very strong, in its neutrality, in its willingness to engage, and recognizing the diversity of opinion that naturally comes when you have a diversity of people addressing political problems. So I think on this note, I will stop, and I would thank you once again for being members of our panel and for the very interesting topic that have been covered and the insightful presentations so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Can we put that together for that? Now, we'd like to take questions, comments, contributions from the audience. Those online too can please post their questions in the chat box. I see 2 hands up. I see 3 hands up. 4. Can we have the vote? Okay, 5. May I begin with the lady, please? Don't worry, I'll come to you. Please be there.
My name is Edith Soke, my diamond. My contribution goes to the second presenter. While you were highlighting the internal and external challenges of Nigeria development, I believe you forgot to include ethnicity and nepotism, which are the major challenges bedeviling Nigeria currently. For instance, the issue of when you're given a job, you want to give the job to those that are related to you, whether the person is competent or not. And in such an atmosphere, development cannot take place. And what you see is that mediocrity becomes the order of the day, because merit is not sacrificed on the altar of mediocrity. And again, on the issue of ethnicity, you saw what played out in the last presidential election. I was listening to one of the political party campaign, which I would not like to mention. In the course of the campaign, I saw one of the party chairman sensitizing the citizens. He was telling them that if this particular candidate failed in this election, know that it is this particular religion that have failed. So I think the major problem of Nigeria is actually internal. It is more of internal rather than external. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Can we please make it brief, Dr. Osemina?
Yeah, thank you. I'm James Okoli Osemina. Sorry? Okay, so the comment I have is that, well, having listened to the scholars, I want to say that the problem with Nigeria is that the founding fathers, like they said, did not believe in the unity of the country. And if a leader who was a founding father said that Nigeria is just a mere creation, I think what we suffer, we are still suffering, is foundational problem. And moving forward, the solution, like when you talk about resource costs, the oil industry, we need to start looking inwards to address our problem and stop blaming the colonial master, because we can't continue blaming them forever. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Is there one person here who is, I thought I saw, yes, I'll come to you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name is Ayodeji, and I want to ask the presenter who presented on on the constitution issue and ideology. So what I picked from that presentation was that there is a kind of hypothesis saying that there is always a convergence of ideology before divergence.
Yeah,
if
yeah.
I may get the presenter correctly. So I want to ask, is there an historical precedence to this hypothesis in developed democracy, in quotes? That's the first question.
I'll take just one question on benefit of others.
I have quite a number. All right, thank you very much, all the presenters, for giving us some thought to think about. I'm Peter Osimiri, that's my name. I have a number of questions, but perhaps I will ask just one because of time. Let me speak to the last speaker. You said Nigerian parties don't have ideology, and then you also said ideology does not necessarily mean that we're talking about something that is teleological. And I find that very problematic because ideologies are supposed to be normative principles that leads you in a particular direction. So there is no way you can remove the end, the idea of the end from an ideology. And by the time you were done, you ended up saying that, okay, parties in Nigeria are more interested in identity structures. And why they do that is because they want to grab power. So it appears to me that parties in Nigeria do have ideology, but the ideology is do whatever it takes to grab power. Thank you.
All right, I'm already feeling the heat right here. Please let's keep to the focus. Let's keep to the focus of the paper so we don't let people overboard.
Okay, thank you. I am Dr. Chinedu Malisi.
Can you speak louder?
Yeah, I said I am Dr. Chinedu Malisi. I just want to make comments on the papers. The first was the one that was hinging on what the elites should do, on saying that the elites should, as a matter of fact, have a rethink of what to do. I think I don't seem to agree so much, because what we see that is holding Nigeria down is what me personally call the fear of class suicide, because the elite wouldn't want to in any way lose their value. And so I think you should look more on the part of the citizenry and what the students should do to force the elites to do the right thing. I think this is the angle we should be looking at.
All right, thank you very, very much. That's another beautiful comment. Does anyone have a question? Because I would like that the presenters respond specifically to questions. Okay.
I have a question to Professor Remy. I will be interested whether there was ever a study. Unfortunately, I haven't read the Crippled Giant. I will, but I haven't yet. But I would like to ask whether there was ever a study that looked at the responsibility of the intellectual elites in terms of educating the nation and the youth to understand their position and their responsibility in taking the action So not only blaming the economical elite, but also looking critically at the intellectual elite and what they're doing.
Okay, thank you. That's for Shahidi. I hope you got it.
Thank you.
Yes, I did.
So I have a question for the first presenter, Mr. Ajayi. So I wonder, could you specify, because you mentioned that like the incoherence of foreign policy has hindered like Nigeria, right? So could you specify how does like this incoherent foreign policy undermine maybe the success of Nigeria? Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we'll take sharp responses from the presenters. I'll take the questions from, you take the questions to you first. I think just to be sure, there are two direct questions to both Jibola and Paul.
Let me
Any comments, yeah.
Let me quickly respond to my sister that asked, I made comments about ethnicity. Yes, I actually tried to, because of time, I tried to make that with prebendalism. Prebendalism is when you get to power and you're trying to take care of those who are around you only. And that is exactly what ethnicity more or less is all about, even though there's a sharp difference between both of them, but they more or less tend towards the same area. And that is why I tried to remove ethnicity and focus more on prebendalism, which is very, very vast. Okay, going by what you asked, foreign policy. Yes, Nigeria has had inconsistent foreign policy over the years. And that is as a result of we having different personalities coming to power. Like I mentioned, most of them are accidental leaders. They never planned to be there. So there is no major, outlined foreign policy that everybody must, follow through. So as a result of that, everybody comes with their own policy. And when they do that, there is no consistency. There is no harmonization of interests. Everybody goes in their different paths, and that is major challenge Nigeria is facing today now. So I feel and I believe if Nigeria can, have a trajectory they want to follow. Look at, take for instance, US now. It doesn't matter who comes to power. Everybody knows the direction US is going to. But Nigeria, it is not the same. So there is need for us to have the kind of a think tank that will strategize way forward for Nigeria. This is the path we want to go, and everybody follows that direction, irrespective of which government comes to power. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you for that sharp comment.
Yes, so I'm going to respond to two questions together. The first about whether there has been historical precedents about convergence and divergence thesis argument that I make. Well, anyone who reads the Federalist Papers, for example, in America, would realize that the political parties in America then were not so called. In fact, they were basically interest groups rather than political parties. And so, and the foundational problem about whether Nigeria is supposed to, that's actually at the center of our development and democratic crisis, because the kind of nation that we want has not exactly been defined, and it hasn't even been settled. Which is why all the flip-flop about ideology is always in contest, because that identity problem, the kind of what nation Nigeria should it be a meritocratic society? Should it be, all of that has not been settled. And if you try to do that, if you try to impose those sort of ideologies before you get power, you literally be doing, I'm sure you asked a question about the role of the intellectuals. In fact, a lot of times the problem is the intellectual class, because there's a sort of coloniality of ideas. So for example, the idea that Nigerian political parties are without ideologies were actually propounded by a lot of public intellectuals who say, oh, because we don't have ideologies such as we have in America, we don't have them such as we have in Europe. So Nigerian political parties have actually been ideological from the very start. And the sort of questions they try to answer were not the kind of questions the intellectuals wanted them to settle. So for example, when we were talking about unity and diversity, there are questions about federalism. There are questions about how do we allocate state resources? How do we define who a Nigerian is? Will you be a Yoruba person first or before you become a Nigerian, or are you a Nigerian first before you become you are Yoruba? Those are the kinds of questions that are at the center of federalism, that are the center of questions about allocation of resources. So, and talking about the teleological functions of political parties, I say that ideologies are just a means to an end for political parties. And the primary aim of political parties are first to get power. And then they can then define their ideologies. And I make this historical argument because eventually when political parties are doing the same thing, well, other parties, it's just very logical that the parties will now then say, this is how we are different from the others. But for now, they need to get power first. And how they get power is the kind of arrangement between whether it will be ethnic alliances or gender alliances, or in our case, religious alliances. And that's what they have done. You will see that over time, these sort of alliances have shifted. And where it has not worked, they have tried other things. And that's what basically political parties are, because they are rational actors, after all. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that, Chibala. I'm sure you're aware that by saying intellectuals are a cause of our problem, you're indicting a lot of people in this room. So over to you, Prof.
Yeah, thank you, Toby, for that comment. What is the responsibility of the intellectual elite? I think the way the question has been raised makes one point that I stated before very clear, that when you talk about elite, there's always a need for decomposition in terms of what elite are you referring to? Are they conscious of themselves as a particular kind of elite? Now I'm asked to talk about the role of the intellectual elite. We assume that we know them because sometimes we just talk about elite, not in an empirical sense. But to be sure that this is a question I've spent some time discussing, I would like to say that if you have seen my inaugural lecture, you know that some of us have actually interrogated the role of the elites. And I think a lot of scholars, whether within Nigeria and outside, have addressed the role of the elites in the Nigerian quagmire. The inaugural lecture I'm talking about reads titled, "If Gold Rusts, What Will Iron Do? Academics, Politicians, and Institution Building." We have looked at the idea of intellectual elites, and we can look at it from different perspectives. One, the individual scholars, the individual as a member of the intellectual elite. Two, we can look at the elites from the viewpoint of their professional associations, and many people have studied the role of ASU and so on and so forth, and other intellectual organizations. At the individual level, of course, they've looked at when intellectuals occupy leadership positions in Nigeria, what do they do? And to the point you even asked, how have they run the universities as intellectuals? And then, of course, lastly, we look at the intellectual institutions themselves, the universities, the polytechnic, the research organization and institutions. What role have they played in national development? Now, what this then means is that there's a whole repository of research that has addressed this in terms of, for instance, in the universities, what kind of curriculum do they run, what kind of knowledge is being produced, and how is this knowledge disseminated into the policy process. I think that if you look at what is available in general, you find that there's a mixed result in terms of what has been achieved. We have institutions at different moments that are very well run by the intellectuals and have made significant contribution to society. There are others who have really misbehaved and have run their institutions aground. And in terms of the professional association, of course, you know, the long drawn battle between ASU and the government, and how, as a result of the cat and mouse relationship, or cat and dog relationship, the situation within the university has become very troubling. A situation where last year, so they went on an 8-month strike and their salaries were seized. So it's an interesting thing, and it's not an easy thing to answer. Another paper that I've also written to address some of these issues.
Sir, we are running out of time. I don't know if we can suspend it
Yes,
now.
I'll round up in a moment.
Okay,
I'll
we have
round
another
up in a
question.
moment.
Yeah.
I'll round up in a moment. So the question of responsibility is something that I've addressed in elite competition and political responsibility, where I address some of the institutional changes that have occurred and the efforts to address some of these problems, drawing on both the intellectual elite and so on and so forth. So yes, there's a mixed result in terms of the level of responsibility, but when you look at it very closely, I think that's also the source of redeeming light for the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. We'd like to have this conversation, but because this panel has to end by this time, but the conversation continues because we are transitioning into another session. The good thing about the Crippled Giants is that it reads so many things that we cannot exhaust discussing it in a single session. So if you don't mind, you could step out a little bit, take a walk, but we are resuming for part 2 of this session shortly. Thank you very much. Please, our hands together for the presenter.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Shegun. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.